Good afternoon, Niner fans. It's Monday. It's President's Day. It's a day off. There hasn't been a lot of news. I've been taking a couple of days off myself, but guess what? We come crawling back. And guess who came crawling back? My man Ted. My man Ted from TED Talks. But I haven't talked to him in a long time. If you guys remember over the off season, we were going live almost every day after training camp. What's good, Ted? How the hell have you been, man?
Hey, Raj, been good. I mean, obviously it's a bummer that the 49ers lost, but great to be here with you, and always great to chop it up and talk a little Niners. So I'm excited to be here. So thanks for having me.
No doubt, man. Always good to have you on. It was a crazy season. It ended in heartbreak, and now we call this the smoke season, or some people call it lying season, whatever you want to call it. That's what type of season it is. And today, just like any other day in the off season, there's rumors, there's all this crazy talk, and I want to kind of bring this up. This is kind of the lead, I guess. Since we got a lot to talk about, there's been a lot of things happening over the last couple of weeks since the last time we talked. Brandon Aiyuk, he's got his fifth-year option. They picked it up last year. It's set to be $14 million for him this year to play under that fifth-year option. But after this year, he's not signed to the Niners. So everybody knows they have to extend Brandon Aiyuk. We know he's the top priority player-wise on this team. He's the next big star. He put together a heck of a season, his best season. He had over 1,300 yards receiving. He was he was middle of the road in receptions compared to other receivers in the league, right? I think 31st in receptions, but he was very efficient. He led the NFL, and I think in yards per catch. Like, this guy was a dog. You put him on any other team, Ted, probably going to have the best stats out of receivers if he gets the volumes, right? That's kind of where Ayuk's head is probably at this point in the season. What do you think? And today, there was a reporter, Dan Graziano, I believe. Let me pull up the little article. He says that he predicts that Aiyuk will get traded. Now, it's just a prediction, but this is what it says. It says the most likely outcome to me is the way it shakes out is Aiyuk ends up getting traded to a team where he's a clear number one wideout and where he can get extension he wants. Leaving the Niners to draft his replacement in the first round, that's the cleanest way for them to address all of their needs. I see San Francisco extending Hufanga and coming to some sort of agreement with Kyle Juszczyk and Greenlaw that keeps them both around. That leaves the Niners to run it back with the same basic core, some upgrading key spots, and Aiyuk cheering them from afar. So this was the big rumor of the day. This was the big, prediction. Again, it's just what this guy, this analyst thinks. He's an ESPN writer. That's kind of where his head is, because there are big contracts that they have to kind of figure out and navigate. And if they can't come to an agreement, they would have to trade Aiyuk, and he could probably give you a first-round pick, a la DeForest Buckner. So what do you make of all of this, Ted?
Well, I mean, I think you said it earlier, smoke season, whether it's, people guessing about what's going to happen, or, Brandon Aiyuk or his girlfriend or his brother. This is the time of year where people posture and they make you feel like they want to leave because they have to, or else, you can lowball them. And the 49ers always try to lowball even star players. They try and get a good deal. Prague likes to get a good deal. So does John Lynch. So, I don't think we'll trade Brandon Aiyuk. I think, if anyone's freaking out about it, I think you just need to think back to like some of the things Debo did. Mm-hmm. And I think it was quite a bit more dramatic, especially scrubbing his Instagram account. And I don't know, there were some people that were close to him saying, "Oh, we're out of here," kind of the same way Brandon Aiyuk's brother did it. Mm-hmm. So some similarities. But I do understand, like, the one thing that nags at me is something that you mentioned, his, maybe wanting to be a wide receiver one. And a lot of people will say, "Oh, well, he's the wide receiver one on the 49ers," but he's not when it comes to targets. And then a part of me wonders if he could really be a wide receiver one if he's getting all that attention from DBs and whatnot, getting double covered all the time, because clearly when you play for the 49ers, a lot of people have their eyes on Christian McCaffrey. A lot of people have their eyes on George Kittle. A lot of people have their eyes on Debo Samuel, which allows you to have this, like, highest yards per catch during the season, the 2023 season. So it's not just as easy as just going to another team. But I mean, I think any wide receiver would rather be on, let's say, the Chiefs, and I hope that's not where he goes. Let's just say the Chiefs, who are year in, year out the most pass happy team by percentage of plays. They throw the most passes of any team in the NFL. And, then you look at the Niners, and we're not exactly the opposite of that. We don't throw the least passes, but, we do run the ball some of the most. And so that's not ideal for anybody who wants to like really, make their mark in the NFL, make their name known. But, he did have his best year ever. And I think it's easily arguable that Brock Purdy could continue to improve because, as we all know, Brock was, rehabbing from that injury well into training camp. He didn't look good in training camp. If he has more time to learn more plays and get more synchronized with our weapons, including Aiyuk, there's every reason to believe that Purdy could improve a little bit more this year. I don't think it'll be like last year, because last year it was like, man, all of a sudden he starts throwing deep and he starts peeling off these long runs and whatnot. But there's every reason to believe that that's not the best that Brandon Aiyuk could do in San Francisco. So that's sort of my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much going on with this whole topic. And shout out to the chat. What's up, everybody? Paul Hope says, love the hat. Shout out to everybody out there. Make sure you guys hit like button, subscribe, all that good stuff.
Oh, speaking of the hat, duck down a little, because when I was backstage, you were ducked down a little more, like all the way up. I can't see your eyes. There we go. Check out all those signatures, folks.
Yeah, we got a lot of good ones. This is training camp. This is the training camp special. When we go to training camp, they sign the hat. Brock Purdy last year when he was a rookie, the year before. So before he even became the big guy, we got some nice signatures on here. But regardless, I want to go back to this Aiyuk. You said a lot of good things there. So a couple things. Brandon Aiyuk, he did have his best season, right? There's a lot of people that say trade Debo instead. He's due $28 million. A dead cat, like his cap hits 28 mil, right? I think they can restructure him. But with Debo, he was kind of smart in a way. He signed a 3-year contract, right? I feel like Debo is going to sit there and say, if you want to restructure me, you need to extend me. So it's going to put the ball in their court. So I don't know if they're going to try to, do something like that. I think he would be a higher, someone that they might have to trade if they want to keep BA. I don't know if you could keep two guys, $50 million for two wide receiver on a run first team. Although you did hit some other points, right? Yeah, Aiyuk had a great season. He had 1,300, yards total scrimmage, somewhere around there. He had 7 total touchdowns. People say he should have a bigger role. I think that's what Aiyuk will say when he goes to negotiations and say, hey, look, fourth option, I had this many stats, 7 touchdowns, 1,300 yards, total reception, scrimmage yards, whatever. Deebo Samuel missed a couple games. He had over 1,100 total yards of scrimmage. He had 12 touchdowns. So as much as people want to say Brandon Aiyuk is a better receiver, which he probably is in terms of the pure wide receiver, the amount of attention Debo gets opens it up for everybody else. He is important to Kyle Shanahan. We saw there's games this season when they didn't have Debo, they struggled. Like this offense it runs through Christian McCaffrey, the run game, and Debo Samuel, number 2. Like you can sit here and say that Ayuk's the better guy, and I think he is in flat out receiver terms, route running, everything like that. He probably is the better guy. But to Kyle, Debo is so important. I don't think you just get rid of Debo. Now, in terms of contract wise, it's going to be interesting because those are things you got to take care of. And the prediction that the guy from ESPN says is that they trade Aiyuk. And I could see why he makes that prediction because he's younger than Debo. He has a high ceiling right now compared to Debo because he is younger. He's hitting the prime of his career. You could probably get a number one, a first round pick compared to Debo right now. It's kind of like the Defoe Armstead situation. A couple years ago, they were in the same predicament with D linemen. You had Armstead and Defoe. Defoe was the better player. He had the higher ceiling. So you can get better draft picks out of him. If you have to make the decision, you got to pay one guy. You trade Defoe. Was it the right decision? Absolutely. I mean, we hated it. I hated the whole situation, but they had to do it because in their mind, it was a better value. Now, Lynch regrets making that move. I hope they don't. I hope you can keep them both. But again, you do have to think about the long-term contract because he did mention guys like Ufunga, Greenlaw. They're both in contract situation years. You got Brock Purdy, who you have one more year of basically paying him nothing. And then after that, you have to figure out how much you're going to pay Brock Purdy. He's your quarterback. and he's not making quarterback money just yet. He will be. So there's so many intangibles. And, Brandon Aiyuk last year in the offseason, he tweeted that. He says, I was the fourth year option, 1,000 yards. It's crazy. Like, in his mind, he could probably be this top. He could probably put Justin Jefferson numbers in his mind. And I don't think it's crazy. But then again, what you said, Ted, is there are a lot of other guys out there, and it opens it up for Brandon Aiyuk. So we're at the end of the day, we're gonna really see if Brandon Aiyuk is that guy, or is he just another guy in the Niners. It's gonna be determined in the next couple of months, couple of years. I love Brandon Aiyuk. He's a hell of a route runner. He's so good, but we have to see if the 49ers value him, and that's what we're going to find out. Now, the other thing is how the 49ers do their superstar deals. We've seen them do this. Bosa, Fred Warner, Debo, George Kittle, they drag it out. And I hope they don't, but knowing the Niners, they're going to drag it out. It's going to be dramatic. You said something too, how Kittle or Debo was very dramatic. I think Ayuk's going to be just as dramatic, maybe more. It's already kind of started off dramatic. It's been a week. His girlfriend, she's saying stuff. The brother saying stuff. And he learned from Debo. They're receivers on the same team. That's his mentor. I think there's going to be a lot of drama. And the other bad thing about having this drawn out is the players kind of take a little bit of a step down after they sign. We've seen Bosa wasn't the same early on. Debo, Fred Warner for that matter. Like, they didn't play at their peak. So that's why it's important to get this done early. But the Niners, how they like to kind of flesh these things out. I want to play what Lynch said, and then I'll have you respond to his interview. This was last week. They met with the media and everything. So I'm sure a lot of people have seen this video. Let me play and share what John Lynch said about bringing back Aiyuk.
And a plan is there for Brandon Aiyuk this offseason, and is extending him a top priority for you?
Yeah, you have to prioritize all these things. Brandon's entering his fifth-year option. Brandon's been a fantastic player for us. Kyle calls him a warrior all the time because of the way he goes out and competes, and that shines through anybody who, whether you're a trained eye or whether you're a fan, you can see the passion he plays with. You can see the production that he's had. We're extremely prideful in what he's become, and he should be as well. And so, your team is comprised of guys, veterans who've been paid very well, of guys who want to be played very well. We got one guy on our team who, is pretty prominent, who can't be played very, real well right now because the CBA doesn't allow. So it's all one big puzzle. We've developed a good cadence over the years, Kyle and I, where he focuses on the season. We do all the planning, and then we present things to him, and we work through it. And that's what we'll continue to do. But, of course, you want a guy like Brandon Aiyuk to be a part of you going forward.
Oh, you want a guy like Brandon Aiyuk to be a part of your team moving forward. What do you think, Ted? What were your thoughts overall on what Lynch said?
I mean, yeah, I agree with mostly what he said. I would just say, when you look at the 49ers, you already kind of hit it, Raj. You talk about Fred, you talk about Bosa, you talk about Kittle, all these big extensions. Yes, they're late, but here's the thing. There's always one big one every offseason. In this offseason, it's Brandon Aiyuk, right? And so I don't, the Hufanga thing, I don't know. I guess we'll see. We missed him, but come on, can we really give him a pile of money before we see him come back from an ACL? You can't because ACLs, they're as good as they've gotten with them. You got to see them play afterwards. There's just too many times guys are never the same after an ACL. So like with Brandon, and also, we talk about, you mentioned earlier, the $14 million cap hit this year, 15 is right in that ballpark. Mm-hmm. That comes down dramatically if we sign him. You then can pay him the vet minimum and maybe like 1/4 or 1/5 of his signing bonus, depending if it's a 4 or 5 year contract. So you get down more in like that $7-8 million, maybe half of that cap hit for the 2024 season. So like you really could probably afford Brandon and Debo for a couple of years together more still this next year in 2024. I think even 2025 before it starts to go up, and they're just both, like you said, that 50 million as a pair combo. And then like you had a great point about DeForest Buckner. We all hated the trade, especially because it kind of caught us by surprise. But really, I mean, if I'm being honest, I didn't really hate the trade because I didn't want to pay him what he was asking, $21 million a year. What I hated was the pick. I hated that we used the pick on Javon Kinlaw, and he started to finally show some signs this year. I actually wouldn't mind if we found a way to re-sign him for a cheap, short contract, prove it deal. I think he's kind of earned that. He obviously showed out in camp. We saw him last year. I felt like the big showouts in camp were, Aiyuk was number 1, Javon Kinlaw was number 2, and honestly, number 3 was Chris Conley, who's now started to show up late. I thought Chris Conley would make that 53-man roster and said as much. So anyway, but let's stick with Aiyuk. That's the thing. So like the whole thing is, let's play devil's advocate. I don't think we'll trade Aiyuk, but let's say we do. Let's say we just can't come to a number, or that being the wide receiver 1 on a pass happy team is just too much to pass up. I will say the one thing that we have going in our favor is, remember, he grew up as a 49ers fan. Mm-hmm. And that's unusual for this team. There are not many of the guys on this roster grew up rooting for the 49ers. I think that's a little ace in the hole that we have too. But let's just say none of that works, and somebody throws a gang of money at him, and a pass happy scheme where he can be the lead dog. Let's say the Chiefs, because honestly, that would make a lot of sense. The main thing to me is just don't go and draft a wide receiver with that first round draft pick, because then you're setting yourself up for Javon Kinlaw 2.0. I mean, I guess unless it's maybe Marvin Harrison Jr. or something, if you're that high up, but he's gonna be like top 5. I don't think we're gonna get a top 5 pick for Brandon. Like when you say first round draft pick, you kind of meant late first round, right? Because you said like maybe a first round draft pick. To me, that sounds like 20s, right?
Maybe. I mean, yeah, most likely, depending on what team. Like, I think there's people in the comments, Red Eye says Texans and Jets will jump on like teams that are familiar with them. Obviously, D'Amico Salat. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't know, man.
McDaniel? I guess they already have
you could get a decent you can get a mid tier, like a top. You should be able to get a top 10 even pick with Aiyuk.
How much longer is Tyreek's contract?
What's that?
How much longer is Tyreek's contract? Wasn't it just 2 or 3 years?
2 more years. But speaking of contract, so this is what from Sport Track. I have the amount here. So check it out. Brandon Aiyuk is projected. It's just projected to make $23 million a year, basically. That's what it is. 3 years, 69 mil for something like that. So it's 23 million basically is what the projections are. Now that's just a projection, but I think the 49ers are going to have to be around that, that range. And that's kind of where Debo's money's around, right? So it's going to be another $20 to $25 million contract for a receiver, which, again, Kyle Shanahan, this was his pick that year. They did trade to get Kinlaw. They also traded up to get Aiyuk. And I think, he's very important to this team. And I think, again, negotiations, when Aiyuk goes into those negotiations with his agent, I honestly think they're going to say, hey, look, we need the ball more. Like that's what I think he's going to really structure this whole argument during the offseason and say, I need the ball more. You need to pay me, and I will prove you that I can earn those, incentives and whatever the case is, that money. And there's people in the comments that say, Aiyuk is always in shape. He doesn't miss games. And those are all points that Aiyuk is going to use in the offseason. They're going to say, man, hey, look, I come to play. I don't miss games. He's very rarely – I think he missed one game this year, right, after he got hit early in the season, had to miss a game. But that was very, very rare to have missed a game. And Debo stepped up big time, though. I remember that game. Deep touchdown to Debo. But you also made a good point in Brock Purdy, right? Their connection, that duo is so, great together. And I think they can continue to get better. And you said it, too. Brock Purdy, your boy, Brock Purdy, he went through rehab last year, right? There was a lot of questions. There were some people that didn't think he was going to be the starter. A lot of people didn't think, right? Brock Purdy had to go through rehab last year. This year, he's going to get a whole offseason to just hone on his craft, like he said. And that, I think, involves him and Brandon Aiyuk going out and practicing. So this duo can get better. And I think the 49ers have to say, hey, look, we're going to have more years of you being great with us. I think they know that he's a priority. I don't think he gets traded, but to be, we have to throw it out there. Is there an opportunity? Is there yeah, there's always a chance. You never know in this league. But, it was the same thing. Everybody thought Debo was going to get traded. It's just a negotiation. They have to make the numbers work. And there's other players on this team that could get traded, or they have to negotiate, a restructure. And that's where it comes down to. Will Brandon Aiyuk get his money? Most likely. Now, who's going to be the cap that they, restructured? Mooney Ward. They can do a extension and restructure with him. Fred Warner, Kittle, Arik Armstead. There's so many options because they have a lot of big contracts. They kind of what they do is they take the contract, they kick it down the road, they kick the can down the road. So I'm sure they're going to do something like that. But at some point, it will catch up with them, and that's why I think with this whole situation, they got to figure it out and make sure that they know what's going on because eventually Brock Purdy's money is going to be to the point where you can't keep bringing in everybody. And I think you're right. Maybe you can keep Debo and Ayuk together for another year, maybe two. But after that, it gets a little bit complicated. And then that's where the draft comes. And I know you said don't use the draft pick if they do trade Ayuk to get a star receiver. There's a lot of good receivers. Now, it just depends on, you know, where they draft in the first. There's some great receivers this year, but at the same time, they need an offensive line. They need to really retool that O line because that is an issue that they've had for a while. Like it's good, but it's not great. And we saw that issue in the Super Bowl where Chris Jones, he went unblocked. We all saw the posts all week. That's an issue. And the 49ers have to address that. As much as they need to extend Brandon Aiyuk, they also have to make sure they revamp that offensive line. Sometimes you got to spend money in that area. And I feel that's an area where they just haven't wanted to spend money. I'm going to play a couple more clips on the whole Brandon Aiyuk thing. I got a video of Fred Warner, what he said about Brandon Aiyuk. And then I'm going to play the video of what Brandon Aiyuk said. And then I'll turn it back to you and I get your thoughts on everything. So bear with me. I'm going to play these clips for everybody. And this is what Fred Warner said about the importance of Brandon Aiyuk. And it's important to know this one because, A, Fred's a leader. And, in training camp, Fred and Brandon Aiyuk, they're battling. Like, they bring the best. You remember, in training camp, these two guys are like the top guys. So it's interesting to hear what Fred Warner says. And he's been through the contract situation before himself.
Brandon specifically, you've pushed him, and you've talked about how you pushed him. How important is he to this team?
Yeah, I'm super proud of Brandon. His growth and development as a player, as a teammate to the rest of the team has been so amazing to see. And I saw something in him early, and I knew that I wanted to see it brought out of him. So that's why I did push him, and that's why I was on him. And I'm not sitting here saying I made Brandon who he is by any means at all. Like Brandon made who Brandon is, and he's just getting started. That's the scary part for the league is that he has so much room for improvement on top of already being an All-Pro and Pro Bowl receiver. So yeah.
Fred, given last one, given this.
Brandon, what are you going to remember most about this particular roster this past season?
Just guys that came in to work to be champions every single day.
Brandon, is this the hardest postseason loss you have experienced?
That's all I got.
Yeah.
Brandon, there's been some stuff on social media. Is there a certain message that you want to get out there as you kind of enter this offseason and there might be contract talks?
A certain message, no.
Is your hope to remain with the 49ers moving forward?
If that's the right move, yeah.
What would that right move look like for you?
Being a champion.
Brandon, at what point are you at this, right now?
So the biggest takeaway from what Brandon Aiyuk says, obviously he was emotional, but he said,
Very emotional.
will you be back? He goes, if it's the right move. That was the big quote, he said. So what was your overall take on all of that? You could tell that Fred really loves the guy. The team really loves Aiyuk. They really saw him grow into this dog, right? And then there's people in the comments that say, he got taken away. Maybe he should have had more targets. But if you watch the film, he was clamped up. I don't know. What was your overall take on Aiyuk in the Super Bowl? And seeing all that what's your overall take here?
I mean, with Fred, it's that whole like iron sharpens iron type of thing. And they definitely got into it. There was a couple scuffles when we were there in camp between the two of them. I think it was like Fred, maybe. I think he had kind of a late hit on Elijah Mitchell, if I recall correctly, and Brandon Aiyuk came flying in, and there was like scuffle, a big kind of brawl broke out. It was pretty interesting for sure. Yeah, he's super emotional. He wants to be a champion, so he wants to either do it here or go somewhere else where he feels like he can do it. So yeah, I mean, I don't really blame him. I mean, but I do think he has that brotherhood with this team beyond just being a fan as a kid. He's been here his whole career, and he's built a lot of really powerful relationships here. And I think that bodes well for us at the bargaining table as well, too.
I think so. I see a lot of people in the comments, and I kind of agree with this. I feel like after the Super Bowl, maybe he was a little frustrated. I think his emotions spilled out because he did want to be a champion. Like he said, he wants to be a champion. I think he feels like he could have did more in this game. And Debo targeted 11 times. Aiyuk wasn't targeted as much as Debo. And again, I think, and this is what I said earlier, Debo is so important to Kyle and his system. Like Kyle trusts Debo. He was playing through a hamstring injury, and he was the most targeted player on the, receiver wise. And I think that might have hit Brandon Aiyuk. I think that might have hit him hard. And, he's a little emotional. He doesn't know if he's, the big threat. And again, that's where I keep coming back to during negotiations. He needs to let Kyle know, like, yo, give me the ball, man. I need to have the ball in my hands. But we've seen so many interviews. We've seen so many video clips where Aiyuk, or not Aiyuk, sorry, Debo tells Kyle, give me the ball. Give me the ball. You remember the Cowboys game a couple years ago in the playoffs? Give me the ball, Kyle. Let's put the ball in the box. Like the mic'd up. Let me put the ball in the box. And he scores first play, right? Oh, my God.
Lions game, too, right? This year, the NFC Championship game, too.
And he did it again, right? Jed York said that Debo told him, I want the ball. Like, I haven't heard anybody say this, but maybe it's happening, but I haven't heard anybody say there's no story of Brandon Aiyuk saying, give me the ball. So maybe Debo just more vocal because he's been in the team for longer. I think Aiyuk needs to say, yo, give me the ball. Maybe he's doing it. Again, I don't know. We're not there. But that's what needs to happen from Aiyuk. Aiyuk needs to say, give me the ball. Throw me the ball, dude. I'm open. And I know a lot of times those routes take a little time to open up, right? Because his route running is very, very precise. Now, maybe Brock didn't have enough time, and that goes back to O-line. Give him the offensive line to open up those routes, to get him the ball. So, again, there's a priority to keep Aiyuk, but there's also a priority of making sure Brock has time to throw it to these guys. And if Aiyuk is your fourth option, maybe he needs to be a higher option, a higher on the pecking list of receivers, because Debo was the top targeted receiver, right, in that game. And again, they just could not score in the Super Bowl. So there has to be some questions to be answered. And again, we don't know. These are just, the things that are coming out right now. And the big rumor is, people are not sure if Ayuk's going to get extended. Is he going to get traded? And that's why we bring it up. Ultimately, my final take is on Brandon Aiyuk. I think they'll find an extension that'll keep him at bay. But it's going to be a long, dragged out negotiation like it always is with the 49ers.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's going to be, cute and nice and easy. I really don't. I think we'll see Brandon Aiyuk scrub his social media at some point. Get ready. It'll happen. Most likely. I'd be surprised if he didn't scrub his social media. I'll be a little disappointed if Brandon Aiyuk doesn't scrub his social media. I need him to unfollow me and then follow me back in a month, and then it go viral again. We need that. We need it for the culture. Just go ahead and scrub that damn social media real quick, Brandon. We know it's coming. We know it's coming.
No doubt, no doubt. I like what you're saying about O-line. I think it's always a bad sign when some guy off the street, because that's what Feliciano was. Let's be honest, he was a free agent and a cheap guy off the street to boot, and he takes your right guard position. That's showing you're not investing enough in your offensive line in those first 5 starters. I think that's a clear as day. So yes, I mean, if we do trade Aiyuk, use that for O-line. Absolutely. Use something for O-line, Kyle. I've been begging for it for years. Hopefully he's finally starting to listen. So I guess we'll see if he hears us. Cornerback is another one that I think a lot of us thought last year in the draft and didn't, and that was kind of a weakness for us as well. Not obviously, Mooney Ward or Diamador Lenore, but Ambry Thomas. Hopefully Isaiah Oliver gets cut. I think that's a couple $1,000,000 we can save, or high 2 millions. So that would be a little bit of money there too. But I think there will be more. And when you look at Brandon Aiyuk, like I said, Debo was more drama. I'll tell you what, Debo didn't do it 2 days after losing the Super Bowl. It was literally Tuesday. It was like we had 1 day of peace, and Tuesday all this stuff pops up. So I think you're right. I think you can only expect a lot more drama because, man, it just seemed a little early to be chiming in on that. Like, we're all still crying and, tears in our beers or whatever. I don't even drink beer, but just bottom line is it seemed a little quick to me to be coming out about me after we had just lost the Super Bowl. So
no, and that's exactly what my take was. At least Debo gave us a little time to kind of, get our feelings. We were sick. We were mad they lost. This man wasted no time. He posted on his IG story like all these memories of the season, and then he posted the cryptic tweet. Don't forget who got you here. He said all that, and then literally the next day, his girlfriend got it popping, where she said,
"Okay, this might have been the last day we touched foot on Levi Stadium, me and Braylon, because we might not be out here next season."
The whole family, and then the brother posts some stuff. Like, come on, man, give it. I haven't even got over the Super Bowl. I don't think I ever will. But like literally a couple days after, they're already going out there. I'm just like, oh man, this is going to be a messy offseason with Brandon Aiyuk.
I got a silver lining for you though, Raj.
Yeah.
No more ladybug stuff.
Yeah, I guess.
I got a question for you too. Now, you talked about Debo's hamstring, and then there was obviously Dre Greenlaw's Achilles. There was Feliciano's injury, Kittle's injury. I feel like there were more. Oh, yeah, Jair Brown had an injury. How much of that do you think is attributable to the shoddy practice facilities that the NFL gave the 49ers? Like, obviously, lower body injuries, clear as day, could come from, bad, surface. But I feel like if you can't run full speed with your lower body, can't that get your upper body out of shape too, to where you're more prone for upper body injuries too, because you're not making explosive contact? I mean, as explosive as you would in practice. Let's be honest, you're not going to be going 100% in practice. But I wonder if that didn't, because if you just look at the 49ers injuries compared to the only injury I recall from the Chiefs was Nick Allegretti, their left guard. I think he tore his UCL fairly early in the game and played through it. But I don't think the Chiefs had any other injuries of note, whereas we had like 4, 5, 6 injuries and obviously the huge one was Dre Greenlaw. And I know Dre already had Achilles issues. It came long before the practice facility. It came, he missed the Rams game. It was because of the Achilles, and he had tendonitis and it was questionable at a lot of those practices leading up to other games and Super Bowls. The Super Bowl. But how much do you think that shoddy practice facility contributed to us having so many injuries in the Super Bowl?
I mean, I definitely think it was a factor because, the 49ers had a lot of players end up with injuries. I know Armstead said he played through a meniscus injury. I mean, obviously that was throughout the season, and we knew he was injured. But I don't think the field surfaces did him any justice going through, having to play through that. Hargrave had a torn thumb ligament. I mean, obviously that probably happened some other way. But, yeah, I don't think it overall helped. Maybe Debo's hamstring injury definitely could have been attributed to that. Niners definitely were wearing down towards the end of the season. The Chiefs had some injuries coming into this game. Their offensive lineman, I think Tooney, he had to miss it, but they didn't have any like major injuries in the game, and that's I think what you're saying. Mm-hmm. Niners didn't. They ended up having tons of injuries after this game, right? Oren Burks got hurt in this game. I think he showed that he had wrist surgery the other day. Like the Greenlaw injury sucked because I was talking to Larry Krueger last week, and we were doing our show. He told me that he asked Greenlaw, how's he feeling coming into this Super Bowl? And this was days before Super Bowl. And he told him, I'm kind of hanging on by a thread. You don't like to hear that. And you mentioned he had the Achilles tendonitis. That's a tough injury. And I know they kind of tried to be safe with him. He missed some time here and there. But anytime you have that type of injury and the way Greenlaw plays, you're at high risk for tearing your Achilles. And that was so horrible to see. And I think that injury, we've talked about it through the week. That was the injury I think that really was the X factor of this game. That was a turning point because they lost their energy. He was really tearing it up in that game. And imagine if he would have played through, who knows what would have happened. He was playing so good in the playoffs. But yeah, I think you can attribute a little bit of something to those practice fields. They had to make the most of it. I know that was definitely a big talking point leading up to the Super Bowl, but you can't make any excuses. You got to go out there play. The 49ers, regardless of all that, Ted, they still had a chance to win. They squandered opportunities, and they gave Patrick Mahomes too many opportunities. And then it led to the next the next topic I want to bring up. It led to them firing Steve Wilks, defensive coordinator, and now we're searching for our new defense coordinator. There's mixed emotions on this one. Some people say that he was a scapegoat. If you actually watch the Niners seasons, I feel like he probably was going to get fired anyways. And I was surprised that he lasted through the season. If you remember in the midseason, everybody was like, Kyle's got to get this guy fired. He had a talk with him. I remember Kyle was on a presser one day and he goes, we're going to have a talk. He came from the booth down to the field. So there was some turmoil. There was some questionable, tension between the guys. I feel like that just wasn't Kyle's guy. If you remember the Super Bowl, he called a timeout. Kyle was questioning one of his game calls, and his soft cover defense was the reason why Mahomes was able to tear him out. He didn't play man coverage. You have two great man cover corners, Lenore and Mooney, who've been so good, and he played him 10 yards off the receiver. And then, of course, Greenlaw's injury sucked, and it led Oren Burks to be out there, and he was getting cooked by Kelsey because they stopped him pretty damn good in the first half. So I think the Wilkes firing was it was justified. He's not a championship level DC. He's a good DC. I think he did some good things. He helped the secondary, but he wasn't an elite guy. And Spags, on the other hand, was Andy Reid. Andy Reid and Spags did circles on Kyle and Wilkes, and I think Kyle knew that. He needs to get an elite talent at DC. Like I don't know. There's a lot of options, and I don't know. Who do you think the 49ers should bring in at defensive coordinator?
Mike Vrabel.
Tell me why.
Well, just because I think he's a pretty good head coach, and he's defensive minded. He's a defensive player from the Patriots. Was his NFL background a linebacker, if I'm not mistaken, or an edge? Mm-hmm. And he's hard nosed. I just think he's young and dynamic, or not young, but he's not old. And I don't know. I just feel like Belichick is too old. I don't think Belichick is looking for a DC job. Brandon Staley's gone around. I honestly don't hate Brandon Staley as much as it seems like a lot of Niners Twitter does. And I just think that's because of him as a head coach. Like if you said he's your head coach, I'd be like, what do I do to opt out? But, as a defensive coordinator, he did a good job with the Rams. They definitely had a lot of talent on that team, but he had them number one in a lot of categories the year they won the Super Bowl. And not only that, you just look at the Rams ever since have been really bad, not really bad, but not very good on defense. So I don't hate him, but he'd be at least third on my list, if not maybe someone internal ahead of him.
Okay. Yeah. I like that. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Staley because of his tenure as a head coach. It really made us question a lot of his decisions. Now, when he was a defense coordinator with the Rams, he was a good defense coordinator. And I think he understands the system because he's from the McVay and all that he understands the system. So I think he would make sense in terms of what Kyle would be looking for. But I just don't think that's the guy that maybe the fans would like. Obviously, the players, who knows if they'd respect him, maybe someone internal, definitely, Chris Kasurek, that's a guy that's always rumored, but he said, in the years before, he doesn't want the DC job. There's Holland out there. But again, if they're going to make this big move, I don't think it's internal. I think it has to be a big name guy. And I like Vrabel. That's my top guy. Now he's he knows the linebacker position. And that's kind of what Kyle emphasized. He likes those linebacker type coaches. D'Amico, Salah, like they were really heavy on linebacker through their years. And D'Amico was a former linebacker. So I think Vrabel would be the best. He was a good head coach. And if he becomes a defensive coordinator and wins a Super Bowl, then boom, he'd be right back in the thick of things and being a top candidate for head coach. And I think Vrabel knows that. That would be a money move. Like him and Kyle would be powerful. Now, Belichick, I think, would definitely be powerful, but I agree with what you're saying. I don't think Belichick goes back to be a DC. So the next best thing is basically Belichick 2.0. It's Vrabel. He is from the Belichick, coaching school, and he is the younger version of Belichick in all intents and purpose. So I think Vrabel would be my top choice. Now, there's a wild card in there that I like, actually. He's a little older, but he's a former 49ers defensive coordinator, Pete Carroll. I like Pete Carroll, man. I think he'd be awesome. I know he's a little older, but couldn't you imagine going out with Kyle Shanahan, coming to the Niners defense coordinator, sticking it to the Seahawks twice a year? Come on, man. Pete Carroll, he's a great defensive mind. Again, I know he's a little older, but
I mean,
Pete Carroll.
I'd probably take him over Brandon Staley too.
Yeah.
And just to see the Seahawks fans squirm, I think it would be all worth it. And here's the thing: Vrabel animated, right? And the problem with like Staley and Pete Carroll animated, D'Amico animated, Saleh animated. The problem with like Wilkes is he's just kind of a plainer guy, and like Brandon Staley is like as vanilla as it gets, just no personality, no fire, and so that would be a problem too. Like matched with Kyle needs somebody who's kind of sort of outgoing and rah and leader of men and type of thing, because Kyle is sort of a little more subdued. He's a little more bookish, let's say. He's brilliant, but that's not his strength, is not getting people fired up and ready to run through walls, right? That's just not his thing. Like the way like a Harbaugh can do.
Yeah. I think this comment right here, Big City Man, he says, "Come on, guys, we all know Kyle needs to find his bags," and that's what he needs. He needs to find that guy that is his just defensive guru. Look at Andy Reid and Spags. Like, that's a dynamic duo, man. Spags is like the like, if you want to talk about a good best defense coordinators in the NFL, it's Spags, man. He's the guy. That's
also the great thing about, as good as they are as a duo, the great thing about Spags is too, the guy never leaves. He never leaves.
I know. That's the thing. If you get Vrabel, he'll probably leave. My man Red Eye says, no Staley, too many bad reports coming out about how he treated the play. And yeah, that's another thing about Staley that I'm not. We've heard a lot of bad things. We've seen some. That's not going to fit with the Niners. Again, whoever comes in and when they open the locker and the first day he steps into that stadium, it needs to be a guy that commands respect. I don't think Brandon Staley does, especially because of his last tenure. People are going to be like, they might question it. He'd really have to earn his trust and the respect from these players. You have some stars, man. Nick Bosa and Fred Warner, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the interesting thing about Staley that I wanted to talk to you about off camera, is if they do bring in Staley, he's a former Charger. I've heard some rumors out there saying that they're not going to bring back Joey Bosa. Harbaugh took over that team. He's probably going to gut that team. He's going to get players he wants. He's going to bring in the coaches he wants. He's going to bring in his team, right? When you're a new coach, and especially Harbaugh, he's going to bring in the people that make sense for him. I don't know if Joey Bosa is going to make sense for Jim Harbaugh. Can you imagine you get 1 year or 2 years of Joey taking a little discount to go play with his younger brother, Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa, the Bosa brothers in the Bay? It's a tongue twister. What do you think, man? Woo!
I mean, if it was like peak Joey Bosa, I'd be down. But Joey Bosa, the last 2-3 years, like how many snaps has he played? I don't know. The guy, he's injured all the time. So it would have to be a pretty good price. But yeah, I mean, just to have Nick and him together, I mean, yeah, Nick would be fired up. Smaller bear to have his bigger brother there. So it's hard to put a price on that for sure. I mean, but like certainly not at what they're paying him, the Chargers, that is. So it would have to be a little bit of a discount, as you mentioned. But I mean, man, if we could get him to stay healthy, like there's the bookend we've always been waiting for Bosa, and turns out it's just another Bosa. So
yeah, I know, right?
Yeah,
but you're right. It has to be a discount because and you're absolutely right. He has had a lot of injuries over the last couple of years, so they'd have to tread lightly. But man, if they had both of them and they could stay healthy together, it'd be fun to watch, because they still need that other bookend. I know they tried to get Chase Young this year, and he's a little inconsistent. He played good in the Super Bowl, but obviously a lot of eyes were on him, and he has to get that contract. So that's another guy.
He played pretty good against the Lions too. I think he had 2 or 3 stops. I mean, when he wasn't giving up big outside runs.
I wouldn't say he was good, because he got just setting the edge was not good. Like that to me was not a good game.
No, that's what I was saying. The outside runs got him, but he at least made 2 or 3 tackles where I was like, "Hey, there's Chase Young." Like, hey, know, because
for sure.
We've been
I
looking
mean,
for him for a while since that trade.
Me too. After like the Jaguars game, he was great because he wanted to make a good first impression. Everyone's like, "Oh my god, like that!" That was smart. He came in, he put in all his effort. He's like, "Okay, I could coast for a little bit because I played great in my first game, and now they're not going to really." Because a lot of people were giving him the benefit of the doubt. Oh, look how good they played. Or maybe he's just. Not, there were so many excuses every week. I made him every once in a while. I was like, "Oh, he might just be sub packages, whatever." He was inconsistent. Bottom line, and now played great in the Super Bowl because, of course, that was the last game people are going to remember. If you go back and watch the tape on that, you go, oh, look, Chase Young did good. He needs a big contract. And with that, I saw the projections on his contract. Right now, they're projecting to make $13 million a year. I saw a little bit too much, I think, for the 49ers because they can get two guys for the price of $13 million. They need a defensive tackle because Armstead's coming off of a big injury, right? He's having surgery. Clelin Ferrell, who I thought they might be able to bring him back, right? Because he was having a solid season. He's a free agent, but he's having he had the same surgery Armstead have. So you need defensive line depth. Even if you bring back Clelin Ferrell, you're going to need a defensive tackle. And you mentioned maybe you bring back Kinlaw for cheap. It was finally a year he was healthy. And then they're still going to need an edge because Drake Jackson got hurt and he didn't pan out the way they thought he was going to be. So defensive line is still a position that they need to, take care of. And every year we need defensive linemen. So, yeah, I don't think they bring back Chase Young because of that.
Raj, you mentioned Clelin Ferrell having the same meniscus surgery as Eric Armstead. Did you just mean meniscus or did you mean, because I don't know, I haven't heard whether it was a meniscus shave or a meniscus repair, right? There's like the difference. My guess with Armstead, what?
I'm pretty sure they both had meniscus repairs. Yeah.
Repair.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Interesting, because my guess with Armstead was it would be a shave because I couldn't imagine him playing through a repair. It seems like
he said it. He said that he
painful.
played. That's what he said. He says he played through a torn meniscus. Like that's why everybody was like, when that news came out a couple weeks last week, it was kind of like, oh damn, oh yeah. That's why I was like,
okay, so they're having the repair, so that's the very long recovery, several months. Mm-hmm. So they probably won't be there for OTAs. Maybe might even miss a little bit of camp, even.
Yeah,
right?
Possibly.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Good to know. Yeah, that interesting. Okay. Yeah, Clelin Ferrell played really well. He at least one thing he was really good at was setting the edge. That's the one.
That's where he was good at. That's where we missed
Clelin Ferrell.
Yeah.
Chase Young, yeah, he was a good value. Shoot, though, you're saying 13 is too much for us, but don't we need him to get 17 to get the third round comp pick from him?
Is that? Oh, I didn't know that. Maybe you're right.
I think so.
I'll have to look into.
Maybe, well, I mean, still, if we pay a third and we get a fourth, that's not the end of the world.
Well, if that's the case, I need to start hyping them up so somebody
can
sign.
Yeah, we gotta get
these guys. Sometimes they reach out to me.
He's worth 18.5, Raj. If he's worth a
bro, a lot of these times these pages like me, like other big sports media pages, they'll tell us to like post my stats, make a hype post. They literally do because that's how they negotiate. So they can pull up the page and be like, oh look at these stats I had, and it's like, that's. Honestly, I remember I can't give you all the names of players, but I had a player reach out to me.
Don't get yourself into trouble.
Yeah, he goes, "Hey man, can you post this for me? I gotta get a contract." Kind of, I don't want to say everything, but I was like, "Oh, okay." And during the off season, sometimes when we post these hype clips, there's some intention behind them. So,
well, hopefully, at least got an autograph out of it.
I won't say any of that, but I get a good. It just, I'm a friend of theirs.
No, I get it.
Yeah. So we'll see. Big City Man says we need a third cornerback. Yeah, I mean Lenore and Mooney Ward were great, but they still need a good slot, a good third cornerback. Or you can move Lenore into the slot. He plays everything good, and then get another outside cornerback. So they definitely need to get another cornerback. We mentioned offensive line. Is there any other positions that you feel the 49ers absolutely have to get this offseason?
Inside linebacker.
Yeah, because Greenlaw's injury, because he's going to miss some time. What about Azeez Al-Shahir? You think the Niners could go and sign him for another year or two?
I mean, I think we would love to. It's just how do you afford him? He's going to be way more than $5 million in 2024. After what do you have? 163 tackles for the Titans.
Yeah, he had a career year, dude, being the top guy.
Yes, he should. He's that's the other problem is again, you're asking someone who like Aiyuk, who we think probably could be a wide receiver one to be much further down the totem pole. And same thing. Now, the good news for Azeez is at least until Dre is back, he would be, a starting linebacker on every down, including nickel downs with Fred. And, if Dre misses the whole year, isn't his contract up anyway at the end of this year anyhow? So, I mean, I hate to say it, but, maybe you do the swap. I don't know. I mean, you don't worry about it. You just sign him, get him here, and then, let it play out, and then trade either Dre or Aziz when they're both once Dre, because you got to have Dre come back, just like an ACL and Achilles. You got to see them play again before you ever even know if they're 100%. I hate to be the one to say it, but Dre Greenlaw may never be the same again. And so
I hate to agree with you. I mean, I work in rehab. I had one of my best friends I went to the game with, his cousin. So Super Bowl, we're sitting there. His cousin's an orthopedic surgeon, and we looked at me and him. We both looked at each other when we found out, because we're sitting there, we're seeing Achilles injury. I look at him, he looks at me, and I'm just like, fucking Achilles for a linebacker? That's, I mean, he's a surgeon. He literally does this for a living. And he looked at me, he goes, Raj. I was like, guys, I know, man. I was like, it's not looking good, bro. So I don't know. I think he can come back and be a high level player because he's still young. He's still great. But
absolutely.
to play at the level he plays after an Achilles is tough. To me, this reminded me of freaking Navarro Bowman. It was literally Navarro Bowman. Like, I was just like, and I mean, Bowman was still good, but he was never the same player after that Achilles, man. And he was so good, but the Achilles kind of slowed him down a bit, So
at least
you're right.
the Chiefs fans didn't throw popcorn.
Yeah, they didn't throw popcorn.
Dre Greenlaw the way they did on Navarro Bowman. That was classless.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know I can see the parallels. Absolutely. So yeah, linebacker would be one. Offensive line, number one. That's my number one priority. Right tackle. Get the right tackle. Hopefully someone who could eventually become the left tackle, because Trent Williams ain't going to play forever. He's playing. He said he'll come back next year and play for that record, but after that, it sounds like all bets are off.
Yeah, how much steam does he have left? You're right. O-line, offensive tackle needs to be a priority. Yeah. Right tackle has been a priority.
So tackle, corner, well, maybe linebacker ahead of corner even. Because we have two good corners. We only have one good linebacker. I think linebacker has to be a higher priority than corner, actually.
I don't know. They do have young guys at corner. Luter and Womack, they're young. They didn't get a big chance this year, but
I mean, I guess we have D. Winters and Jalen Graham too. But
I was just gonna say,
it's so hard to know where they are with their development. We just saw so little of them.
That's
but so just going off what we know, I think linebacker's got to be a bigger for 2024. It's got to, maybe you go with a vet. There's a lot of good, linebacker, including both linebackers for the Bucs are free agents.
That's
Devin
true.
White and Levante David, and there's quite a few other good linebackers that are available. Yeah. So maybe you go free agent there instead of a real high draft priority. But, and for me, Raj, I mean, I'm going to bang this drum. I've been banging it for 3-4 years. I'm going to bang it again. Can I have another tight end who can block and catch, please?
Yeah, let's talk about Kittle in a minute. So before we do, I think you're right, though. I like the comment I had to pin here. Graham and Winters are going to be good, says Loda. I mean, yeah, we think they're going to be good. They draft really well linebackers, but are they going to be good enough to replace Dre Greenlaw? Like in their second year, and they haven't played much. Like that's a big step to go from rookie to Dre Greenlaw status. That's so I think you're right in the sense of they need to get a veteran, or I don't know if you draft someone that's right away going to be an impact. Greenlaw's a special player, so I think you get a veteran and you let these guys like Winters and Graham kind of get a little bit more, action in there. Because Oren Burks, you could get rid of him. You can get rid of Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, and you let Winters and Graham take their roles, and then you get a veteran to play next to Fred Warner. I think that's a smarter move instead of drafting someone hoping, because you drafted 2 linebackers last year, and they're good. They could be good. So you can get rid of Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, get rid of Oren Burks. Sorry, you're gone. Let those 2 guys play, and then you go get the veteran. So I think that's the case. And yeah, they do need to get another tight end. They've been searching for another tight end for years to help with Kittle because he's not going to get any younger. He isn't getting any younger.
Because I love Warner, but he can only block, and Dwelly can only catch. And we have 2 half tight ends.
Dwelly, I don't know. He never made that jump. And then they did draft 2 tight ends last year, but both of them they were non-existent. I know you had 2 tight ends last year. Maybe you bring in a veteran. They looked into tight ends this year. Cameron Latu, he didn't even play. It was a redshirt year. And then the other guy, he didn't do much this year. And I think he basically got the rookie treatment. And,
Yeah,
he was
Braden
only around
Willis doesn't block well. That's his problem.
Yeah.
They say no block, no rock for wide receivers. Well, it's 3 times that for a tight end.
Yeah, that's tough. And Kittle's not getting any younger, man. And I don't know. They didn't give him a lot of targets in the Super Bowl. I know he was blocking a lot. People are mad at him because of the stupid clip of him being funny in the clip. But that's Kittle, man. That's Kittle. He's
He had
always
his back to the ball.
Yeah.
That as he should. That is his priority. You keep that guy in your face. The fumble happens behind you. That is not your fault.
He does that kind of stuff. Every video we see some funny clip, but when the 49ers win, it's like, oh, Kittle's national treasure. When they lose, oh, Kittle needs to stop making jokes. He can't win for trying. But I think that was just, again, the whole point of that whole Super Bowl was there was players that needed the ball that just did. And again, credit to the Chiefs defense, man. They stuck them, man. They played good. Unfortunately, we couldn't stop them. So, yeah, but you're right.
He got to run again.
Yeah. Tough, man.
We got to say Kyle's a Super Bowl choker until proven otherwise.
It hurts.
I'm not going to say 0-3 because I've always said head coach gets the glory, head coach gets the blame.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, we saw it in this Super Bowl. We saw Kyle didn't like a defensive call. He called timeout and he changed the formation. And so Dan Quinn could have absolutely done that with Kyle if he didn't like the play call. He could have said, no, we're going to run the ball. Anyway, I've never seen an offensive coordinator blamed for a Super Bowl loss before, but yet that's the narrative with Kyle. I mean, I'm not saying he's completely scot-free, in the loss, but I don't think that people should be saying, oh, Kyle's 0-3 in Super Bowls when he's only been to 2 as a head coach, where he's calling the plays. He has control of the personnel. I mean, he's in charge. And we saw that in this Super Bowl. So
yeah, I feel bad for Kyle, man. He gets a lot of crap. Unfortunately, he hasn't been able to win the Super Bowl. He hasn't been able to get over the mountain. It took Andy Reid many years. There's a lot of parallels. We've talked about that many times. Like, he's so close, but then he just can't pull it off. And it's he gets labeled as a choker. And I get it. I understand. Going through the whole Kyle situation, but there's a lot of people that say fire Kyle. You get rid of Kyle, man. Who's going to bring you back to that top? And can they get over the top of the mountain? So, I mean, Kyle can get us there. He just needs to figure out at some point how to navigate and be, good enough to get over. They had the game in the palm of their hands. Again, they just didn't capitalize on the mistakes from the Chiefs. And third quarter was abysmal. Third quarter, they got beat, man. And there's a couple things we talked about. Defense coordinator, they're going to address that. That was an issue that Kyle felt that needs to be changed, and they're going to do that. One position, I think the 49ers, I think they just need to get an offensive coordinator. Now, I'm not saying that Kyle's not a good, play caller. He's great, but I think there's just too much, on his plate. Maybe kind of lessen the burden. You can promote Brian Greasy to OC, right? They're going to have to replace Clint Kubiak anyways as passing game, specialist out there. He was part of the passing game coordinator, coaching situation there. Clint Kubiak, went and became the offensive coordinator of the Saints. But you have Brian Greasy, who's the QB coach. You can probably promote him into the OC role, give him a little bit more, responsibilities. And then you're going to have to replace Kubiak, make him the passing game coordinator, whoever replaces Kubiak. I think that's something that, could help Kyle, just give him some options on the game day, like another guy to kind of run things through and just help him prepare. Because Kyle's a great offensive, coach. He's been an offensive coordinator before, like you said, but I think just having all that on his plate as a head coach sometimes might be too much. And on top of that, get the new DC, who I think, could be a real big, help for this team. I think those are things that could help Kyle maybe get over the hump. I think he found his quarterback. Brock Purdy's great. Now they just have to figure out all the other players, like we mentioned, and go from there. I think they'll be back, at least in the NFC Championship game at the very least, because they have a great team. I think they're still one of the better teams in the NFC. But you got to remember, teams are going to plan against the 49ers. Teams are going to get better. They're going to watch the film, and the Niners are going to be the targeted team in the NFC. So there's going to be a huge target on their back, and teams are gunning for them. So with that being said, I still think they can get to the top. They can, be the cream of the NFC, but it's not easy. It took them 4 years to get back to the Super Bowl from the last one. So let's not say it's going to be easy. I just hope that next year they can do it, because we mentioned here the window is not going to be open forever. Trent Williams, like you said, he's not getting old, any younger. Kittle, Debo may not be back after 2 years. Brandon Aiyuk, we don't know what the hell is going to happen with him. Greenlaw, there's so many questions. I just want to see him get it done sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I said a lot in the offseason that Andy Reid was Kyle until Kyle passed on Mahomes. And, now, maybe Kyle does have his Mahomes and Brock Purdy. Not that Brock Purdy is Mahomes, but Kyle trusts him, and with good reason, because Purdy doesn't make boneheaded mistakes. And so, it could be enough to get us over the hump at least once, and hopefully, a couple or 3 times before. Well, it won't be 3 times before we have to pay him. It'd be really once, right?
Yeah.
We really got to do it next year before, maybe the year after. Brock Purdy will be on that vet minimum plus 1/5 of his signing bonus or whatever it is. So I think we have about a 2-year window before we really have to pay Brock. Assumably it's going to be franchise quarterback money. I mean, I think he's a franchise quarterback. I think he's on the borderline, I think, almost of being elite. It's just RG3 said, oh, he's the best quarterback in 2023. And I'm like, come on. That's Mahomes. That's Mahomes. Let's not technically stats. Yeah. But who is Mahomes throwing to and who is Purdy throwing to, right?
I mean, you give Mahomes the 49ers offense. You give him Brandon Aiyuk.
God. Oh, yeah. That's all you would need is Brandon Aiyuk.
No, man. Can you imagine Rashee Rice, Brandon Aiyuk? Let's hope he doesn't go to the Chiefs, bro. Pony up, pay the man.
Yeah.
Kyle Shanahan.
Speaking of which, it's something that came up earlier, and we're talking about landing spots and like people who know him. Mike McDaniel knows him, and I mentioned Tyreek Hill, and you were right. Tyreek Hill is under contract through 2026. So he's not a free agent until 2027, but Jalen Waddle is not under contract for 2025 as of right now. So he only has 1 more year. So they're in the same situation that the Dolphins are with Waddle as we're in with Brandon Aiyuk. So I don't know. There's a chance that McDaniel might, if he's playing hardball with Waddle, he might be like, all right, just give me Brandon Aiyuk instead. I'd rather have Brandon Aiyuk than Jalen Waddle, personally. It's close. But
Waddle's great, but he has a little injury history. And again, we brought this up earlier. Aiyuk,
you did.
He's so reliable, man. And if you look at his stats every year, he's went up and up and up in yards and everything. He is the definition of you put in the work, you're going to get better. I mean, you've seen him. He was a skinny little receiver. He looked like me, and then he became looking big and strong like you after 4 years. Like, that's Brandon Aiyuk, man. He transformed his body. He's been in the gym. He's a lab rat. Like, this guy, or gym rat, this guy's a dog, man. Brandon Aiyuk, they got to pay him, man. In my opinion, just pay the man. I hope that it ends well. Again, my overall take that we said earlier is they're going to end up dragging this out. It's going to be dramatic. There was a comment in here I wanted to hit on. So someone said we didn't mention this guy earlier when we were talking about DC. Rex Ryan. What do you think, Rex Ryan?
I like Rex Ryan. I like him better than Brandon Staley. I might like him better than Belichick, honestly, just because Belichick's so old. And again, like that fiery personality. I think Vrabel, Sexy Rexy, I think they both bring the heat, on the sideline to pump guys up and fire them up. So I like that. And there's another name too that came up that I think, and I think it got squished pretty quickly. So, and maybe most people figured it wouldn't be a starting spot if he did go into coaching, but Sherm, his name came up some too. I just think he would need to start as a DB coach first and work his way up. But I don't know. He's a freaking smart dude. I mean, he went to Stanford, and like, for those people who don't know, like, being a student athlete at Stanford, it's not like a lot of schools where like you bring a backpack and somebody goes to all your classes for you and studies and writes your papers and stuff.
You had people like me doing your papers.
Stanford, like, you got to go and you got to show up and you got to do the tests. And like, so like people like Christian McCaffrey, they're actually really, really smart, and they work really, really hard to get their degrees
100%.
At that school. And Richard Sherman is no exception. He is very cerebral. You like him or hate him, or, hate him, then now you like him, because it's hard not to like him anymore now that he's such a Niners homer. It's pretty awesome. It's pretty awesome.
I love Sherm. but he even said that, I think he tweeted this out a while back, that as his first coaching job, he wouldn't want to be a DC. Like, that's a lot of pressure on him. I think you're right. DB coach, maybe get him in the mix, let him work his way up, kind of get through the ranks, and then he could hone his career. He's still got to learn. I mean, he's a great defensive mind. He's a good he knows the game, but to be that DC, there's still stuff he has to learn, the nuances. Like, it's like any job. You have to kind of understand the small nuances and then work your way up. I think eventually he'll be a great DC. But like D'Amico, he started as a linebacker coach, right?
Exactly. Start with what you know.
Mhm.
That's what was my sort of thought. Or
Yeah.
even
Yeah. But yeah, Sherman's a smart guy, but I think eventually he can be there. But I think this DC role has to be someone that doesn't need any training, doesn't need to be, not a guy that needs to be, promoted from within, like I said, because that's a guy that's still going to be learning the ropes. We need a guy that just knows it, comes in day one. Oh shit, this is the DC. Let's go. You know what I mean? And that's why
and
I think.
the other rub is ideally runs a 4-3 because we all
Yeah,
know.
I mean, you don't want to change things,
We
but at
really
the
don't
same.
want Bosa in a 3-4, ideally.
Yeah, that's true. That's tough, man.
It makes it a lot harder for sure.
We'll see what happens, man. I don't know. Any final thoughts, concerns, question, comments, or anything? It's good having you. We had a good show. Shout out to the chat. We've been pulling 100 people on the chat today. Shout out to everybody.
Nice.
Appreciate you guys for leaving good comments on the chat board today. It's the off season, so shout out to you guys, man. Not everybody's posting content, so it's nice to be here and talking to you guys and keeping you kind of entertained.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's probably going to be a slow week for me. We're heading up to Tahoe.
Oh.
I'm set to see the 49ers Faithful UK folks Wednesday at noon. But other than that, like, I'm in a small condo full of like 10 folks. So you may not see much from me the rest of the week.
Okay.
So if you're going to do one show or two this week, this is an amazing one to have. Thanks for having me, Roger. Really appreciate it.
No doubt, man. It was a good show. Good to have you. Maybe we can make it happen during the off season like we did before. Mondays I'm open until I'm not, so we'll see.
My Monday co-host dipped out for the off season, so
we got a Monday.
I don't know. I can't really answer you on air, Raj, but I'll get back to you in
DMs. For sure, no doubt. Maybe we can start doing some Monday stuff. Yeah, you got to talk to the boss. We got to. I understand. And I'll be working a lot this off season.
I'm just playing, obviously. I would love to.
Enjoy the vacay up there. It's gonna be fun. Tahoe, man.
Yeah, should be good. My son learned to ski last year, and then learned to ride his bike this year. And
Nice.
We got him out on the pump track, and so I think he's going to be a little bit more bold on the skis too. I think it's all going to help.
That's right. It's ski week this week. The kids, my daughter.
Yeah, so it's going to be a freaking disaster up there.
I know. I didn't want to.
It's the world's worst time to go, but he's off from school, so
yeah, that's why they encourage you. They're waiting. They're waiting for your money, Ted. They're waiting for your money.
Oh yeah,
they're waiting for that money. Ski week, baby.
It's a zoo, but like I said, seeing little kids ski and get better, there's nothing like it. So that's the best.
That's cool. It's the best time of the year for that. So enjoy your week, man. Enjoy it. We'll be back next week, I guess. We'll see what happens. And in 3 weeks, actually 3 weeks, ladies and gentlemen, legal tampering period is going to be on Monday, the 11th of March at 1:00 Eastern, I think, something like that. So we got the legal tampering in a couple of weeks.
Sounds good, man.
All right.
Appreciate it as always, Raj. It's been a pleasure.
Anytime. You guys have a good rest of your day. Go Niners. Keep BA in the Bay. Let's go.
Peace and go Niners.